Barbara had always loved May. It was that sweet spot between winter's chill and summer's heat. Her porch filled with light, the breeze still cool enough to keep the windows open. The robins had come back. The scent of fresh-cut grass reminded her of the days when her grandkids used to chase bubbles across the yard. She had just turned 63, still independent, still sharp. Her doctor called her a spring chicken last time she checked in, though that had been a while ago. That morning started like any other. She brewed her usual cup of black tea, no sugar, just a slice of lemon, exactly how Frank used to make it. He'd been gone 3 years now, but the habit had stayed. She toasted a slice of rye bread, sat by the kitchen window, and watched the sunlight spill across the floor, the kind of morning that felt safe. But then, something changed. It started small, barely noticeable, a gentle twist in her stomach, a discomfort she couldn't quite name. She shifted in her chair, pressed her palm against her lower left side. It wasn't pain, not really, just wrong. She looked down at the tea, still full, untouched. That never happened. Maybe it was the bread. Maybe she hadn't drunk enough water yesterday. She'd skipped dinner, wasn't hungry. She brushed it off, another little thing to ignore. She'd learned to live with those. But this time her body was whispering something. And what she didn't know was that whisper would get louder. Louder than she ever expected. So stay with her. Because what happened next could happen to anyone. And knowing what to look for might help you or someone you love avoid what she nearly couldn't. Barbara stood slowly and walked over to the window. The sun had already climbed higher than she thought. The day was warming up fast and usual for early May, a quiet reminder that summer was around the corner. Whether she felt ready or not, she opened the window. The breeze was still cool, but dry. Her mouth felt dry too. She blamed the toast. She reached for the tea, took a sip. Bitter, lukewarm. It didn't help. She glanced at the sink. The glass she used for water still sat upside down, untouched since yesterday. Somehow she hadn't had a single glass of plain water since Tuesday. But she shrugged. I drank tea. That counts, doesn't it? She chuckled to herself. Frank always said that too. Even when the nurse insisted it didn't. She turned away from the sink. Her hand rested against her stomach again, subconsciously now. The pressure hadn't gone away. Not worse, just still there. Still strange. But the day was calling. She had groceries to get. And the neighbor's daughter was dropping off a pie. There was no time to sit around and wonder if a little stomach pressure meant anything. She grabbed her bag and keys, but paused for a moment at the door. She felt dizzy, just for a second. A wave, gone as fast as it came. She blinked, shook it off. Too fast out of the chair, she thought. But no, her body was trying to say something. Tip: some people over 60 lose their natural sense of thirst, especially in the mornings. And tea, coffee, even juice do not replace water. Plain, room temperature water helps regulate blood pressure, digestion, and in heat, even memory. Barbara didn't know that, but you do. So stay with her. Because what happens next could help you understand the warning signs before it's too late. The parking lot at the grocery store was already buzzing when Barbara pulled in. She hadn't expected it to be so hot. Not in early May. But as she stepped out of the car, the heat hit her like a wall. She looked up. No clouds. The sun hung directly above her, bright, sharp, unfiltered. She reached into her purse. No hat. She used to carry one. But lately, she thought it made her look older. She buttoned her light cardigan and moved toward the entrance. Her skin prickled. She hadn't worn sunscreen. She never did unless she planned to lay out, which she hadn't done since the 90s. It's just a quick trip, she told herself. But maybe I should have grabbed the wide brim one, she added silently. She passed a young woman in shorts and sunglasses, holding a toddler by the hand. The little boy had a sun hat tied under his chin. Barbara smiled, smart mom. She looked down at her own arms. Freckles, thin skin, veins closer to the surface than they used to be. But she kept walking. Just get in, get out. She needed bananas, eggs, and maybe ginger tea. Her stomach still felt odd. The air conditioning inside the store felt like heaven. But the momentary relief couldn't hide the truth. Her body was already under stress. She just didn't feel it yet. Here are a few things not everyone knows, but they can make a big difference. Older skin is much more vulnerable to sun damage, even on cooler days. Even mild heat exposure can raise blood pressure and weaken hydration, especially if you're on medication. A simple sun hat isn't just for comfort. It helps regulate brain temperature and protects against heat-induced dizziness. Barbara didn't think about any of that. But maybe, now you will. Stay with her. Because the next moment could happen to anyone, and it's one of the most commonly missed warning signs. The line at the checkout was longer than usual. Barbara stood quietly behind a young couple with a cart full of bottled water and sports drinks. She leaned slightly on her cart. Her palms felt warm. Her mouth was dry again. That strange feeling in her stomach hadn't faded. It had just settled into something dull and persistent. She scanned the display near the register. Candy, magazines, a small bottle of electrolyte drink caught her eye. For a second she considered grabbing it, but she didn't. Too expensive for something she wasn't sure she needed. She shifted her weight. The store lights suddenly felt a little too bright. Her vision sharpened and then softened, like a camera trying to focus. She blinked, twice, pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth. Still dry. The cashier called the next customer. Barbara took a step forward, and then it happened. Just a flicker, a soft buzzing in her ears, a floating sensation in her chest. Her hand gripped the cart tighter. She smiled at the cashier, hoping it would pass. It did. For now. She paid, took her bag, and walked slowly back toward the exit. Sometimes dehydration doesn't feel dramatic. It feels normal. Just a little off. Just a little tired. Barbara didn't recognize it for what it was. And that's why it's so dangerous. Here's something worth remembering. Mild dehydration can mimic anxiety, fatigue, even early heart symptoms. If your lips feel dry or you're swallowing more often, you're already behind on fluids. A sip now is better than a fall later. Barbara kept walking. She was almost back at her car. But her body was already running on empty. Stay with her. Because what comes next is something every older adult should prepare for. Barbara stepped outside, and the heat wrapped around her like a thick coat. She blinked against the glare. The air felt heavier now. Even her grocery bag seemed to weigh more than it should. She paused beside her car and looked down at her keys, slightly disoriented. Her fingers fumbled to unlock the door. The black leather seat inside was already hot to the touch. She leaned in, placed the bag on the passenger side, and sat down slowly. Her blouse clung to her back. Her breathing felt shallow, not panicked, just short. She closed her eyes for a moment, hoping it would pass. It didn't. She hadn't had breakfast. She hadn't had a glass of water. She hadn't rested once since she woke up. Still, she turned the key in the ignition. The engine purred. The AC kicked in. And still she didn't stop. No water, no brake. Just another task waiting at home. She put the car in reverse, pulled out of the space, and drove off. She didn't see the woman in the parking lot who paused to look at her, worried. She didn't feel the headache that was quietly forming behind her eyes. Because sometimes the biggest danger is not doing anything at all. Here's something worth remembering. Always keep water in your car, especially in warm months. After any dizziness, stop. Sit, drink, let your body catch up. Older adults are more sensitive to temperature shifts, even if they feel fine at first. And if you're thinking, this sounds familiar, then maybe it's time to pause. Stay with Barbara. Because what happens next could be the wake-up call you didn't know you needed. Barbara set the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. The house was quiet, just like always. She told herself she'd sit down in a minute. Just as soon as she wiped the counter, put the milk in the fridge, and folded the towel that had been hanging since yesterday, she moved slowly, but not carefully. She didn't notice her own reflection in the microwave, shoulders slumped, face a little pale. She reached for the upper cabinet and suddenly had to steady herself. Her vision blurred just enough to make her stop. She gripped the counter, took a breath, then stood upright again, pretending nothing had happened. "I just need to sit," she whispered. But she didn't. Instead, she turned back to the sink. The glass was still upside down, untouched, again. She looked at it, and for the first time that day, she paused. Her hand hovered over the faucet. But before she turned it on, something shifted in her chest. A pressure. Low, slow, like a hand pushing from the inside. She froze, still standing, still holding the edge of the counter. And in that moment something became clear. This wasn't just the heat. This wasn't just getting older. It was something else, and it wasn't going away. Stay with her, because what she does next could save her life. And knowing how to act in that moment might someday save yours. Reminder worth keeping in mind. When your body tells you to stop, stop. Fatigue, pressure, blurred vision, shallow breathing. Never normal, never worth pushing through. Sit, drink water. Tell someone, even if it feels too small to matter. Barbara lowered herself into the kitchen chair, slowly, carefully. Her hands trembled, just slightly, but enough that she noticed. Her heart wasn't racing, but it felt heavy, pressed. Like she'd just walked up a long flight of stairs, even though she'd barely moved. She looked out the window. The sun had shifted. Shadows stretched longer across the yard. She had been out longer than she thought. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, both hands now resting on her stomach. That odd pressure was still there, maybe even stronger. But what scared her more was the fatigue. It didn't feel like tiredness. It felt like something pulling her inward. Like her body wanted her to stop completely. She stared at the phone on the counter, just a few feet away. She could call her daughter, or the nurse hotline, or maybe... No, her pride stopped her. She had always been the strong one. The one who kept going, who didn't complain. But then a thought crept in, quiet but powerful. What if this isn't nothing? She pressed one hand to her chest. Still not pain, just pressure. A fullness that didn't belong. Her other hand finally reached for the glass. She turned it over, let the water run. And this time, she drank slowly, deliberately. She didn't know if it would help, but it was something. And sometimes, the smallest act of listening to your body is the beginning of something bigger. If you've ever felt like this, don't wait. Any unexplained pressure in the chest, stomach, or back should be checked. Don't dismiss fatigue that feels different from your usual tiredness. And if you're hesitating to call for help, call anyway. That hesitation has cost lives. Barbara didn't know what exactly was wrong. But she finally knew one thing. She wasn't going to ignore it anymore. It took her 10 full minutes to pick up the phone. Not because she couldn't, but because part of her still didn't want to. But something deeper overruled her pride. Maybe it was the glass of water still trembling in her hand, or the silence in the room so heavy now it felt like pressure on her chest. She called her daughter, didn't sugarcoat it this time, didn't say she was just a little tired. She told the truth. And that truth changed everything. Her daughter didn't wait. She called the clinic. Then, without hesitation, she called Barbara a car. A neighbor would drive her. Barbara protested. Of course she did. But the dizziness returned as she tried to stand, and that was enough. She sat back down, hand on her chest, breathing slowly. She didn't faint. She didn't collapse, but she could have. And when the car pulled up 20 minutes later, she was still sitting in that same chair. Glass empty, body calm, but spirit shaken. As she stepped out into the evening air, she realized something. It wasn't just her body asking for help. It was her life. And this time she listened. What you do in these moments matters more than you think. Trust your symptoms, even if they seem small. Listen to people who love you. They often see what you ignore. And most of all, never wait to get checked just in case. You're not wasting anyone's time. Barbara didn't know it yet. But what the doctor would tell her that evening would explain everything. And it would change how she lived from that day forward. The clinic was quiet when Barbara arrived. No flashing lights. No chaos. Just a soft chime above the door. And a nurse with kind eyes who helped her to a seat. Barbara didn't argue this time. She let them take her vitals. Blood pressure, pulse, oxygen, temperature. The nurse raised her eyebrows, then left quickly without saying much. Within 10 minutes, a doctor walked in. Young, calm, direct. He sat down across from Barbara. Clipboard in hand. No judgment in his face, only focus. "Barbara," he said gently, "how long have you been feeling off?" She hesitated. "Since this morning," she replied. He looked at her, not unkindly. "And before that?" Barbara paused. "A few days, maybe a week. Some stomach pressure, a little fatigue." He nodded. Clicked his pen, wrote something down. "You did the right thing coming in. Your blood pressure is elevated and you're dehydrated. But that's not all. We're seeing signs of gastritis, possibly even a developing ulcer." Barbara blinked. An ulcer? She had never had one. Never even thought about it. "I don't smoke. I eat clean," she said, almost defensively. He smiled kindly. "It's not always about what we eat. It's about what we ignore. Here are a few things that often go unnoticed, until it's almost too late. Chronic dehydration, especially in older adults, can wear down the stomach lining. Long-term use of NSAIDs like ibuprofen, even low dose, can trigger internal inflammation. Caffeine and skipping meals can increase acid levels, causing damage slowly, silently." Barbara sat quietly, absorbing the words. The fatigue, the pressure, the dizziness. It all made sense now. She hadn't been unlucky. She had been unaware. Stay with her, because the next 24 hours will reveal how close she came to a crisis, and what saved her might help you too. The room was dim. Only the soft green light from the monitor pulsed in rhythm with her breath. Barbara lay still, her head propped slightly, arms resting over the blanket. No noise. Just beeping, and the faint hum of the air system overhead. It wasn't fear she felt. Not exactly. It was something slower. Something heavier. She stared at the ceiling tiles, trying to remember when she had last stayed overnight in a hospital. Maybe when her husband had his surgery 12 years ago, but never for herself. She turned her head. On the bedside table, a glass of water, a small notebook, and her reading glasses. She hadn't touched any of them. Her thoughts drifted. How many mornings had started with coffee and silence? How many aches had she dismissed as just age? How many times had she waved off her daughter's reminders to drink more water, see the doctor, take breaks? She had always said, "I'm fine." And now, here she was hooked to machines, watching the monitor for answers. Her stomach tightened again, not from pain, from realization. It hadn't been one big mistake. It had been 1,000 tiny ones, stacked day after day. Until her body couldn't whisper anymore, it had to shout. Sometimes the warning signs don't come in loud crashes. They come as fatigue, dry lips, a skipped glass of water, ... And that's why this story matters. Because someone watching this right now might be feeling just like she did a few days ago, and it's not too late. Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds. It painted long golden lines across the floor. Barbara was already awake. She had barely slept, not because of pain, but because her mind wouldn't stop replaying every decision she'd made in the last few weeks. A quiet knock broke the silence. The same doctor from the night before stepped in, clipboard in hand. Fresh coffee in the other, he smiled. "Good morning, Barbara. You gave your stomach lining quite the workout." She managed to smile. "Is it really that bad?" He sat down. "Not irreparable, but it's a wake-up call." She nodded slowly. No resistance this time. The doctor leaned forward. "You didn't collapse because of one bad day," he said gently. "It's been building." Small choices that made sense in the moment: coffee over water, skipping meals, brushing off symptoms. Barbara looked down at her hands. "I just didn't want to be a burden." He paused. "Barbara, ignoring your health doesn't protect others. It endangers you." That hit her harder than she expected. Here's what he told her next, and it might help you too. Hydrate before you're thirsty, especially in summer. Avoid heavy caffeine on an empty stomach. Don't use NSAIDs like ibuprofen daily without your doctor's advice. And never ignore ongoing bloating, dull pressure, or strange fatigue, especially when you're over 60. Barbara took a breath, deep, slow. For the first time in weeks, it didn't hurt. The doctor stood. "We're going to discharge you tomorrow, but only if you promise me something." She looked up. "Treat your summer like your second chance." Barbara nodded. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds. It painted long golden lines across the floor. Barbara was already awake. She had barely slept, not because of pain, but because her mind wouldn't stop replaying every decision she'd made in the last few weeks. A quiet knock broke the silence. The same doctor from the night before stepped in, clipboard in hand. Fresh coffee in the other, he smiled. "Good morning, Barbara. You gave your stomach lining quite the workout." She managed to smile. "Is it really that bad?" He sat down. "Not irreparable, but it's a wake-up call." She nodded slowly. No resistance this time. The doctor leaned forward. "You didn't collapse because of one bad day," he said gently. "It's been building." Small choices that made sense in the moment: coffee over water, skipping meals, brushing off symptoms. Barbara looked down at her hands. "I just didn't want to be a burden." He paused. "Barbara, ignoring your health doesn't protect others. It endangers you." That hit her harder than she expected. Here's what he told her next, and it might help you too. Hydrate before you're thirsty, especially in summer. Avoid heavy caffeine on an empty stomach. Don't use NSAIDs like ibuprofen daily without your doctor's advice. And never ignore ongoing bloating, dull pressure, or strange fatigue, especially when you're over 60. Barbara took a breath. Deep. Slow. For the first time in weeks, it didn't hurt. The doctor stood. "We're going to discharge you tomorrow, but only if you promise me something." She looked up. "Treat your summer like your second chance." Barbara nodded. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. The next morning came without an alarm. Barbara woke naturally, no rush, no noise. The sun filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, hands in her lap. No stomach pain, no pressure, just quiet. She walked to the kitchen in her slippers, passing by the old coffee maker. For the first time in 2 decades, she didn't turn it on. Instead, she reached for the kettle boiled water, sliced a lemon, added a few mint leaves. As the tea steeped, she prepared breakfast. Slowly, half a banana, a boiled egg, a small bowl of oatmeal with just a pinch of cinnamon. She carried her tray to the window table, sat down, and looked outside. Birds hopped across the fence. A breeze moved the trees. She smiled, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because she had finally stopped pretending it was. And with each sip of warm tea, she whispered to herself, "This is mine. This new life, this choice is mine." And if you're wondering whether real change is possible at your age, Barbara's story is proof. It doesn't take a miracle, just a decision. You don't need to fix everything. Just one thing. And every time you choose water over stress, rest over guilt, you win. You're not too late. And you're not alone. Later that afternoon, Barbara sat at her kitchen table. A soft breeze drifted through the open window. The quiet tick of the wall clock kept her company. In front of her, a blank notepad. A pen. She tapped it gently against the paper, then began to write. At the top she wrote, "My summer promises." Not resolutions, not rules, just reminders. She wrote slowly, carefully. Each line, not for anyone else, but for herself. Drink water before coffee. Rest when tired, not when finished. Never ignore stomach pressure. Say yes to joy and no to guilt. Walk outside every morning. Call someone every evening. And remember, my life is not a burden. It's a gift. She placed the pen down, exhaled, and smiled. It wasn't just a list. It was a conversation with the version of herself she almost lost. She folded the paper, taped it gently to the fridge door, right next to a faded photo of her daughter holding her first grandchild. Barbara looked at it, nodded to herself, and whispered, "I'm still here, and I'm not done yet." Sometimes the smallest rituals become the strongest protection. A note on the fridge, a change in routine, a quiet promise to stay. A week had passed. Barbara stood in her garden, hands lightly dusted with soil. She had just planted basil, her favorite. The smell reminded her of summers long before life had gotten so fast, so quiet, so fragile. She looked up at the sky, bright, still, and in that moment, she didn't feel old. She didn't feel weak. She felt ready. Inside the house, the list on the fridge was still there. The tea kettle waited. So did the phone, and her daughter's number was finally on speed dial. Barbara didn't need someone to rescue her. She had rescued herself. By listening, by learning, by choosing change while there was still time. This summer could be your turning point too. Not because something terrible happens, but because you stop waiting for something terrible to happen. Start with a glass of water, a slower morning, a checkup you've been putting off, even a simple promise to yourself. Because the truth is, the life you save by paying attention might be your own. Thanks for watching. If this story helped you in any way, consider staying with us. This channel is here for one reason: to help you live better, feel stronger, and stay informed. You deserve that. Take care of yourself, and see you in the next story.